Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this picture has been already edited, and we are going to deconstruct it and see what all the things we can do with it or what have been done to it. So if you look here on the right-hand side, which has all the panels, the edit panel, the crop panel, the remove panel, the masking panel, they all have little dots next to them. Can you see that? On the
Yes.
far right side. That means each of those functions have been implemented in this picture. And since we are now in the edit window, you can also see there's an eye with light, with color, and with optics. That means these functions have been implemented within this window up here. So if I were to turn off the light, this is how the picture looks before adjustment. If I remove the color, a very subtle change, nothing to be, to write home about. And if I do the optics, again, very little change there is. So let's open up light and let's see what we have done here. We have increased the exposure, we have increased the contrast, decreased the highlights, and then shadows have been lightened up. The whites have been brightened, so the overall white area, how bright the whites are going to be, has been affected, and the blacks, the deepest, darkest areas have been darkened down to get this photograph. But this is really just the beginning, because there are other things that I have done to it with the masking tool. Specifically, I have applied 2 different masks. So let's look at that is first what masks are. If I go to this plus sign here, it gives me all these different masks that can be applied. The top of here where it says select, whether it's select object, select sky, background, object, or people, these are algorithmic masks that by themselves detect the subject, the sky, the background, or people. Really, you don't have to do anything. It will automatically detect it. Brush is the only one that has been with Adobe forever from its inception, and that is completely manual. You select whatever you want to affect. And then you have linear gradient and radial gradient, which are vector type. You form a shape, either a line or a circle or an ellipse, and the adjustment will be contained within that, shape. And then at the end, you have the color range that you can select that you are going to affect, or the luminance range if you are working on a black and white or color. So these are all the masks that you can apply. Let's say we would like to apply the subject here. It is thinking and thinking, and it found the subject. Since I selected my highlight color to be, bluish, light bluish color, greenish color, it highlighted what it found in this color over here. And it put this sign here that it says this is the subject or the person.
Where did you pick the color?
Yes, that's my question.
Say again?
Where did you pick the color that your highlight was going to be?
Okay, so here on the right-hand side, okay, it's not working again the way it should be.
We're all looking like, where is it?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to do the sharing again. That's the So here on the right-hand side, it gives you the option to select the mask color.
Just have to go down that pull-up, down that side of the window, don't you?
I do, but it's for whatever reason not coming up. That's why
Hmm.
I'm being perplexed. So I'm going to remove this mask. So this is the mask I'm working on. And right here, show overlay.
Hmm.
And this is the color that I picked. I can click on it and it gives me the color panel. Let's say I want to make it red. I pick the red color and I'm done. So that's how you select the color of what you want to highlight. I usually try to select a color that is not contained in the picture, and that's fairly easy to see. So since I have this brush active, I can paint with it anywhere I want, and all the changes would apply to that area. So if I don't like what I did, I can come back here and change it from a paint to a eraser, and I can come and erase all of this. Are we good?
Umit, I've had an issue when I've picked something, like maybe his beak or his legs wouldn't pick up as part of the item. It only highlights a part of what I'm trying to get instead of all of it. How do you make sure it gets
Is
all
that
of it?
in the brush or is that in one of the select functions?
Select for mask.
Okay, yeah, it sometimes the algorithm doesn't recognize all of it. That happens. What you have
So
to
how do you,
do,
yeah,
what you have to do is let's create that. So I'm gonna do select subject here, and it did select everything, right?
all of it. Yep.
Okay, so if I want to modify this selection, if I want to modify this selection here, there is an add and a subtract button. So if I say subtract, for example, I don't want to have the legs included in this case. I'm going to use a brush and I'm going to remove the legs from it.
So it
So
would
now,
be done manually.
yes, it has to be done manually.
Okay.
So that's the the brush function and the automatic selection function. Now that I'm using this mask and this mask is active, I can make, for example, some of the changes. I can change the I can change the exposure. And when I do change the exposure, if I put any value in there, the selection color disappears and you actually see the actual effect. So here I'm just increasing the exposure quite a bit. And then I am going to come in and change the color slightly to a more yellowish, orangish color. And then I'm going to come down here and increase the clarity of it so that the ribs in the wings show up better. So let me come in closer. If I use this eye here and turn off the effect of the clarity, you can see that it's just blurred it just a slightly. Or if I come back here and hide the color, it is, yes, less yellow. If I release it, it becomes more orangish. And here it is the light that I can affect. Or I can come up here and turn off and on the entire mask, not just the individual adjustments, but the entire mask. And I let go and all the effects come back. So regardless if you have used a brush like I have done here with mask 1, or if we have an automatic selection that is mask 3, all these effectors, all the adjustments we have down here are present. It is really how you select the area that you are going to affect is different with these different mask types. The one thing to remember is if you are using a brush like we have here in mask 1, you can change the size of the brush. You can change the feathering of the brush. You can change the flow or density of the brush. It is up to you how big of a brush you would like to have and what properties that is with it. If you are using a selection like the subject, person, sky, whatever, you do not have the option to feather it. It finds whatever it finds and puts a nice, feather around it, maybe. You don't have any control over it. You have the controls in terms of color, you have the brightness controls, the sharpness controls, and everything, but you do not have the ability to soften the edges, to increase its size, or anything like that.
Hey, Umit.
Yes, sir.
That auto mask option, what does that do?
Oh, auto mask, yes. So this auto mask is active when you have a brush selected. And let me hide these masks here so you can see better. So if I create a new mask using a brush, then I can tell it to auto mask it, and I'm going to reduce the size of this. Well, maybe. I'm going to reduce the size of this brush. And when I tell it to paint with auto mask on, it is going to stay within the bounds of where the inner circle is picking up as a brightness or as a color. So it's going to affect only this area. It is not going to affect the blue sky. So it is selecting only what is in that color-wise and darkness-wise in that inner circle. If I turn the mask off, if I paint over here, it's going to spill over into the blue area. If I turn it back on and paint in here, it stays for the most part. And if there is something that spilled over here, I can come and take the eraser. Again, with the mask on, I can just take the area that is in the blue out. And I have my new mask. So then I could come here, increase the exposure. I can decrease the shadows to affect some contrast. I can then come in and change the color to be more orange and more magenta. And then I can come here and change the hue to, let's say, something like this. And then down here, I can increase the clarity. And I may even affect some dehaze to it. So all these controls are available when you are in Brush.
But this stuff is not available in the normal Adobe Photoshop. This is just for this program.
This is available in the Camera Raw.
Okay.
It is not available in the Photoshop part of it, but this is part of the Photoshop workflow, because you cannot open up a raw file directly in Photoshop. When you open up a raw file, you are going to open it up either in Lightroom, or you are going to open it up through Bridge in Adobe Camera Raw and make all your edits, and then, if necessary, take it to Photoshop itself.
Is it better to do it in Camera Raw or in the Bridge?
Well, Bridge is the viewer.
Okay.
You don't do any editing in there. You can put catalogs together. You can put in ratings, and so it's your browser. It doesn't do any editing. The
Okay.
only thing you can really do there is put in keywords.
So the editing in Photo Raw is what's really doing the work.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, Mark. So, any other questions at the moment? All right. So let's me go back to Bridge, close out this image itself. And let me take another image and share a screen with you. So this is a black and white image, which originally it was not. If I turn off the BW, this is how the photograph looks after I did all the edits to it. And the most important edit I did to it was putting a mask to it, which, as you can see with the red, I'm going to change the color of that from red to something more visible, like this blue here.
So if you pick to mask, auto pick to select subject, what would it pick? There's so many things in that picture.
Well, so that's what it tries to analyze and try to figure what it is. So if I click on the mask here, it tells me I used a brush. I didn't use a select subject. So I got in here, with a brush and painted this statue the way, that as a selection. And I took all the, rails out of it, the concrete block and everything. I just wanted to see the statue be selected.
And
And
did you have to pick that? Did you have to pick auto mask so you wouldn't go outside the boundaries?
well, see, that's a great question because in this case, the surrounding area is so fuzzy that although I picked an auto mask, it was going way outside of it. So I had to come back in and clear out what I didn't want and what I didn't like. And what did at the end happen is that if I hide this mask, first of all, let me hide the color. If I hide this mask here, you can see that it was very orangish, brownish, dark appearance. But I wanted for it to stick out a little bit. So I put the mask in, and the mask has changed its color to a greenish patina that a bronze or a copper statue would take. And I brightened it. You can see that I added, quite a bit of exposure. I added highlights, and I, took it from being orange, more bluish, and more greenish. And that's all this color that happened at the end. So without that mask, it looks, fairly dark and brown. It blends into the background. I want it to stick out, so I, brightened it up. And it also, what I did here is I increased the clarity, which increases the local contrast on this area. So it might have made it look a little bit sharper than the rest of the image. And then at the end, I decided that I wanted to turn it into a black and white and applied the black and white preset. Okay, any questions or any additional questions?
Yeah, my question would be, do you save this in different steps along the way, or do you can go back on the history and do it that way without having to save it separately?
It automatically saves it. Unfortunately, unlike Lightroom, it does not have a history panel where you can go back. But once you make an adjustment, the adjustment is sticky. If you don't like what you have seen, you can go back and change any adjustment you have made. So you see the values that have changed. And as I mentioned, you have those dots next to them that tell, or the eyeballs that tell you that you have changed those values. But it does not have a history panel where it's, tells you what you did and in what order you did it.
If you wanted to, you could go through and just give a number to it and save it, then move on to modify that one.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can also take snapshots along the way that tells you what the different versions look like, but it doesn't have a history panel, which Photoshop does itself. until you close the file. But while you are operating in that file, Photoshop keeps a history file, but it, goes away as soon as you close the file. And Lightroom does actually have a history file, which in a way is nice, but I never really had a use for it, so I don't miss it.
Okay.
Can you make a virtual copy of it so that you can edit it again?
Oh, you can edit it anytime you want, and you can make copies, yes.
Okay.
Your workflow, do you generally do the main edits before you do masking, or is it just up to how you want to do your edits?
Well, the first thing I usually do is I get the chromatic aberration out of it, and I get the lens corrections done. And then I go in and make sure that I have selected the right profile. So I may have taken, your photographs the day before in a portrait session, and I may have used the portrait setting, but now I am on the outside and I'm editing a picture of a landscape. I would like to use the landscape, preset. So I make sure that I have the correct preset. And then I will do the automatic, push the auto button and see what it gives me. If it gives me what I like, I keep it. If I don't like it, I will tweak and, change it around. And then if there is something in there that I need to highlight or, darken down, then I go ahead and do that.
Okay.
All right, our next example. So this is not a particularly good photograph or of any value, but it's very valuable in terms of trying to show all the different masks. Again, if I look here, I have made some light adjustments and I have made some mask adjustments. And under the light adjustments, it tells me that I changed the light and I changed the color. So I changed the color for saturation and for vibrance. If I were to turn off the lights, this is how the photo looks. It is horrible. And if I go to the masks, I have applied 2 different masks to this photo. And without the mask, this is how it looks. With the masks on, you can actually see the bird. And I applied 2 different masks to it. The first mask is select subject. And if oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Are you seeing the photo or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if I
Oops.
somehow Zoom is not liking to play with okay, now it took me to Photoshop, which
Yeah.
I had no intention to going to.
Makes me feel good that your machine treats you like mine treats me.
Yeah. So here in the mask, the first mask was a subject selection. And if I, enlarge the area so we can see it. If I turn off this mask, the bird looks quite dark. Once I let it come on, the bird is nice and, brighter. I increased its exposure. I increased the contrast, because if I don't do these, the bird looks, quite hidden. And let me turn hide mask too. Without the mask, with the second mask hidden, it's really dark. If I come back to the first mask and open up the exposure to where it was, now it's looking much better. The color is also turning to more yellowish. If I hide it, that's visible. And I have also increased the texture, and I increased the clarity to make the bird look much better. But the real trick here was to apply another mask, namely a radial gradient, to mimic the sun shining on the bird in one of these, little patches here. And that brought up the bird much more much more to the forward than without the mask. So if I hide it, it's hidden. If I turn it on, you can see that it highlighted it. So this is a radial gradient. Unlike the brush that I have used before, the radial gradient can be modified without affecting anything as many times as you want. I can make this larger. I can make it rounder. If I don't like it, I can bring it back. I can rotate its shape.
Hey, Umit, you're in
We're
photo.
not seeing,
We're seeing the Photoshop screen.
Oh, okay.
You kept talking about a lot of things I didn't see happen.
Well, so the second mask is what makes this bird pop in the photograph, because I, added quite a bit of exposure to it. And if I hide it, the bird is lost in the dark. But, this gradient simulates one of the patches of light that's coming down through the leaves. And I can, make believe that, that piece of light was there. Now, this is a radial gradient. So this is a circular gradient that I can change its shape, change its size, and I can change its orientation. This is non-distractive, and it can be modified anytime you want. Even a week, month, a year later, when you come back to it, you can change it. It is a vector gradient. It is not a painted gradient, so it can be changed any which way you want, anytime you want. This is one of my favorite masking tools. I like it for most of the part better than the brush, although brush has its own uses, which cannot be done with the radial gradient. One
so
of the things
basically you just choose an area and then you have the ability to change exposure or light.
yes, color, exposure, light, and the shape of the area that is being
Right.
affected. So I want only this area to be affected. So that's what I have selected. And very much like with the brush, I can tell it to show me the overlay color. And as you are seeing here, the edges are quite diffuse
Mhm.
because I can feather the gradient. And it is right here. I can feather it 100%. So it is going to be a very smooth gradient from the point where it is 100% to 0%, or I can feather it to 0 and it will give me a very, very sharp gradient. So this would not be what I would do. This would be very obvious that I have added this light here. But if I were to come in and start feathering it,
Oh, yeah.
let's say I feather it to
Okay.
about 45, 50%, now it looks very natural.
Does that light come from that picture or just from your adjustments of the light exposure?
Well, it always uses the available light there and makes it brighter. I am not adding an additional light to it. So I'm not painting in any light. I'm using that available light there and making it brighter or making it darker. So it is not like in Photoshop where you take another layer and you apply white paint over it or a different color. This is only using the available light there and modifying how strong or how weak it is or how what color it should be. So in this image, we used two different types of masks. One mask that was a radial gradient and a second mask that was a subject selection. So we used an algorithmic and a vectorial gradient or selection, I'm sorry. Any question on this image? So let's come to our fourth photograph to edit. This is something I took very much like the last picture about 2 weeks ago down in the Savannah area. We were down in Tybee Island with Georgia Nature Photographers Association. And, this was one of our early morning trips. We got up about 2 o'clock in the morning, went down to the coast and, photographed the Milky Way. Again, it shows me that I have adjusted the light. I have made some cropping changes. I removed a few things from the image and I made some masking. Those are the dots here on the right-hand side that are telling me what I have made, what changes I have made. In the lights, I have obviously adjusted the exposure quite a bit. I have adjusted the color here. And I have adjusted the texture, meaning I have increased the local contrast or the hyperlocal contrast, the local contrast, and the overall contrast. And then I added some vignetting. You may or may not be able to see the vignetting, but that is the whole purpose. You don't want the vignetting, the corners, to be visibly dark, although you have darkened it just ever so slightly. So if you look at it, the corners are quite bright in this case, but if I put that vignette in, it looks much more natural. And then under the removal, I apparently had something right here that I wanted to remove, and I removed it, which was a red piece of light here shining from one of our headlights, but this red light was distracting for me, so I simply removed it. And in the masking department, I applied 2 linear gradients and a radial gradient. the first mask is applied to the top, to the sky portion. I decrease the exposure a little bit, with this exposure being at minus 0.1. I change the tint to make it more greenish and more bluish if I hide it. This is how it looked like, but I didn't like the sky this color, so I made it more blue. In the second linear gradient, here, I have added a little bit more exposure and a little bit more blue light, because I wanted to have the forefront to be looking more in unison with the sky. So this is my gradient here. I can remove it and it looks more yellowish. I can put it back. It is more purplish. I can change the feathering of this gradient. There are 3 lines, as you can see. Beyond this red light, everything that's behind it is affected 100%. Between the red and the blue, that's where the gradient is formed. And then from here on, it is minimal or none applied. So that's your feathering within this gradient.
What about that top button on that line? You got,
This one, sir, is where you can rotate it around, where it applies.
understood. You make a propeller out of that.
Now here is the radial gradient. I wanted to have the Milky Way to pop out from this image. This is how it looks like without the radial gradient. And with the radial gradient, it looks much better. Let me hide the boundaries of it and show it to you again. This is without the gradients. This is with the gradients. So if I want to get a new gradient, I could go here, get a radial gradient, and apply the gradient right here, because there's a portion of the Milky Way that has not been affected yet. I can show the boundaries of this gradient, and I'm going to line it up with the top of the Milky Way. I'm going to hide the overlay color. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to increase the highlights a little bit. And I'm going to increase the overall exposure just ever so slightly. I'm going to move it down just a touch to be in the center, make it narrower and longer. Bring it up right over here. And maybe I'll go down here and increase the clarity a little bit to bring the details out. And maybe the texture. But that made it a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to take down the exposure. And that looks about right.
What would the dehaze do if you use that?
Oh yeah, if I were to use the dehaze, it would increase the contrast quite a bit, and it would look like this. Or it would look like this. The dehaze is a very heavy-handed way of changing the contrast. It needs to be used very sparingly. The way I use them is I usually stay between 20 and 30 in the texture, between 10 and 20 in the clarity, and less than 10 in dehaze. If I have to use it, I use it maybe about 5. But, 3, 20, 20, 30, 20, 10 is usually what I do.
A lot of thunder
I
up
was-
where I am.
Oh. Go ahead.
Just saying there's a lot of thunder outside my house, so I might blink off, you never know.
Well, so is by me. It's gotten really dark, and it's pouring outside where I am.
I'm hearing a lot of the thunder and all that too, and also hail. It's hailing out there now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
we just
Hylas,
have
you're about
thunder.
Hope your
you're about
car-
half a mile on the other side of the property line over here, so you're not too far away
Yep,
from where I live.
I got a metal roof over my patio and it's hail is making big noises.
Yeah.
I bet it is.
So I was working with somebody else, and they said I was the first person they saw who paints by the numbers in Photoshop, and that's probably true. I do, but that gives me some consistency that I can say, okay, this is how I'm going to start, and take it from there rather than coming up with some hodgepodge numbers. I have done this enough times that I know where I want things to be. And also I know where things start looking really bad if I, overdo it. So those are the numbers I have kind of found that work for me. All right. So let's look at this lovely azalea photograph here. This was at the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, and as you can see, I have not made any adjustments in light, in color. I made some adjustments in text effects. Specifically, I put a little bit of a vignette around it, but I did do some cropping and I did do some masking. So what did I do in all of these? If I take the vignette away, you will see that the corners are nice and bright, but I wanted the attention to come more to the center flower here. So I put a very small vignette. As Pat was talking about it yesterday, they don't want you to go any more than, about 15 or 13. Each photograph deserves its own number. But I found that, 15 is probably the max that you would like to use on vignetting. Then it becomes more obvious. You would like to have the vignette not to be obvious at all. In terms of masking, what I did here, let's go back to cropping. And if I remove the cropping, you will see that there were some light areas over here that were protruding into the photograph, and that was distracting for me. So instead of trying to paint this darker, I simply decided to put a little bit of a crop in it. Are we still seeing the? Are we still seeing the flower?
We see the
It's got
flower
the
and the
grid
little
on
hash
it.
marks and the grid,
Yes,
flower and the grid.
that's the cropping grid.
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to that, I went in, did some masking. And in this case, the mask I applied is a radial gradient. And I increased the brightness ever so slightly, just 0.15. I added quite a bit of contrast, and I increased the highlights significantly. If I hide this, you can see very easily how much the center line becomes brighter and brings it to your attention.
Mhm.
So not too much, just ever so slightly. And I also added texture and clarity to that area. So without the texture and clarity, it looks slightly dullish. If I bring it back, it pops here. The overall effect going from this all the way to this. And that really takes you right in here. When I was taking this photograph, these green light shoots over here were really nice and bright, and I did like it, but also there was no other way to, photograph this beautiful flower. But when I looked it on the screen when I was editing, this green was very, very bright. So I had to find a way to change the brightness of the screen. So I went to the color mixer. In the color mixer, like we have seen yesterday, when Pat was showing this, I can adjust the luminance, I can adjust the saturation, and I can adjust the hue. What did I do? I took the luminance of the yellows and the greens. So it was so much green here. I took it down so it doesn't distract from this very nice bright flower. I did.
How did you mark the flower? I mean, the leaf, the green leaf.
I didn't. That is the beauty of this color mixer. It uses the colors and only affects those colors that are listed over here. I know green is made out of yellow and green. So I reduced the saturation on the yellows and on the greens. I also reduced the luminance on the yellows and greens. I didn't have to select anything. The
Did it
program.
affect the other leaves?
I'm
Did it
sorry?
affect the, did it
No,
affect the
because they are
other
not as green.
green?
They're much more darker. So look at it. I'm going to hide it. There is really no
Hmm,
noticeable effect.
no.
But Umit, if other leaves were approximately the same color, then it affects
Yes.
globally.
Yes, absolutely. This affects globally, and we are going to see another example of it. So if these leaves over up here were green, they would have been affected at the same time.
Right.
But since these are dark orange or brownish, they didn't get affected. Even these are so dark that they really didn't get affected. But
Sure.
if we had the same color or similar color up here, they would definitely be affected. And then I would use one of my brushes go in there and select the leaf, and then change its color and saturation to get this effect. That's a great question. Thank you. All right. In this image, it seems like I have affected the light adjustment. I have affected the cropping. I have affected masks. And we are going to go through each one of them and look at it. So if this was a fairly dark image. I increased the brightness of what I wanted to show. I affected the color, the vibrance and saturation. Not much, but ever so slightly. And then I added some masks. And here I have 3 different masks that are, very different from each other. One of my masks was a brush. Which I brushed in right over here. And that's me. That was my shadow. Because the sun was coming from behind me, there was no way to hide myself here. But using a brush, I could brighten the area and hide myself or hide my shadow. So this is a fully manual operation that I patched in this lit area. The second one was adding a linear gradient in order to darken the foreground and lead your eyes to the bright colored area here in the center, which I added by, decreasing the exposure by about half a stop. And lastly, I used an auto selection. I told it to find the sky, and I used a exposure value of -2 and converted it from being a very bright sky to a very dark, gloomy sky. I didn't do any, brushing in. I let the program find the sky for me, but it didn't find everything. It left areas around here quite a bit that it didn't select. So I had to go in and select all these areas manually. And for that, I used a brush, this one here, and I added all these areas that it had not selected. So I'm hiding it right now so you can see how bright the areas are around the trees. And I selected them manually. It got quite a bit darker. So auto selection is not always perfect. You have to give it a helping hand from time to time. Questions on this gradient?
Where is that?
This is the Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah.
Just a comment, that's my hometown. It's a beautiful place.
Sure is. Let's look at another photograph. It tells me that I changed the lights and I did some masking. Well, on the lights, if I hide it, it's a little bit dull, so I brightened it. And using the mask, I only used a linear gradient here because in the original photograph, this dirt area was very bright and it was taking away attention from the azaleas and from the Spanish moss on that live oak. So I put in a little gradient, a linear gradient.
What's that look like?
I'm sorry?
Can you show us what your circle looks
Yes,
like?
I'm trying to. So this is the gradient that was applied into this area. And what I did is I took down the brightness just a little bit from 0 to 0.5. And I also changed its color to add a little bit more warmth to it. So this is without the color correction. This is with the color correction to match the color of the dirt here with the leaves over here. And I didn't do anything else, just those two adjustments. So just by adding a little bit darkness over here and little warmth to it, I was able to match the color of the path here with the color of the leaves and dirt in this area. So just one simple gradient.
If we turn this photo into one of the competitions, are the
Mhm.
judges able to figure out what we did?
No.
What postings we did when they look at it?
No, because this is what you are seeing in the editing program, and you can see everything that I have done over here. But if I go here at the top and tell it to export out to what I want, then it is going to become a JPEG, and all these edits that I have made are going to be burnt in. So the judge is never going to see what you did or didn't do.
What the original looked like?
Correct.
Some
And they're saying, what the hell is he talking about?
on some programs, it seems like what you've done shows up when you look at the picture in a editing program, but not if you save it out as a JPEG, is what you're saying.
Right. Except not what you have done, but if you have been a little bit heavy-handed and the monitor has not been calibrated or is a very cheap monitor where the contrast is out of whack, you might be able to see some of the edits as blotches. But the judge is not going to see what steps you took and what edits you made, because they are only visible in the editing program. They are not going to be transmitted to the JPEG.
Well, pretty much people are expected to edit, aren't we?
Well,
Unless
they
it's
are, but
restricted somehow.
each club and each competition has its own rules and regulations as to how much you can edit, what you can edit, whether you can take things out, whether the edits have to be done by you or machine edits are available. So it's all, it's really always a different story and different rules.
Rule based.
Yeah. Yeah. Some competitions specifically prohibit you using Topaz, the sharpening program. Okay. Whatever the rules are. All right, let's go to another image. So playing with the leading lines here, and the fence is leading you all the way down to the purple area over here. But for me, the attention was in this little piece of Spanish moss that had gotten caught in this rail. So I decided just to use this area with very shallow depth of field. As you can see here, I really have used, only F8 just to have this area focused, and the rest of it stays out of focus, both in the front and in the back. Edits done to it, a little bit of cropping, because I didn't need all the way on the outside of it. I did masking, and a very simple mask here. This is a radial gradient. I highlighted the Spanish moss. So I put a nice gradient around it. I feathered it about 50%, as you can see. And I made really very minor adjustments in the overall exposure, a little bit in the whites, and a little bit in the highlights. Again, if I hide it, this is how it looks first. And now your eye goes directly to the piece of Spanish moss. No color change, no clarity, nothing in the curve. Just a simple exposure value added to this Spanish moss area. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come and continue with some additional images where we are going to apply some other tricks to it. It depends on, which file type you are going to choose will depend on what you are going to be doing with it next. If you are done with editing and you're not going to do anything else with it except, submit it to, competition or send it to your kids or whatever you are going to do, you can just send it out as a, JPEG file. If you are going to be opening up in Photoshop, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to tell it to go to Photoshop and open it up as is. Or if you want to save the ability to edit it later, then you can, without losing any information, you can then exit it out as a TIFF file or as a DNG file. So all the edits you have made in these images are saved on the sidecar files, which contain all the edits you have made. They are non-destructive. As long as you have that file, those files will exist and affect each other. You don't have to worry about, having to save it as a separate file. They are going to be there. And most of my files exist as, original RAWs with sidecars and very few JPEGs that have been derived from it.
I might have missed the first part. What are the particular advantages of this application program, if you will, versus, say, Photoshop and Lightroom that lead you there?
Sure. This is the develop module for Lightroom. You cannot open up raw files in Photoshop directly. You have to open it up through this program. So that's the gateway for raw files to be edited in Photoshop. The advantage over Lightroom, the only true advantage over Lightroom is that it doesn't deal with catalogs. You don't have to worry about, losing catalogs, making catalogs, or in which catalog your files are. They are in the system root directory, wherever you put them. So you can move files around anywhere and anytime you want. You don't have to move them in Bridge. You can move it at root directory level. and then you go back to them, no problem at all. Other than that, there is not much difference or advantage to it over Lightroom. The Lightroom is something that was derived from the Camera Raw. It came in much later.
Thanks.
They, as you have seen, have essentially now all the same controls. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Right. Let me pick up another photograph. So this is the Isle of Hope Marina for early sunrise, 5 o'clock in the morning. And looking at the little tabs on the right-hand side, it tells me I have done some light editing and I have done some masking. With lights, I brought up the shadows in the foreground because I wanted to have a little bit of definition of the grass and all the reefs here. And I dimmed down a little bit of the highlights. I obviously have added some, chromatic aberration correction and lens profile, which is the first thing I do anytime I open up a file. And then I have applied a linear gradient over it. This is how it looks like without the gradients. And this is how it looks like with the gradient. What did the gradient do for me? It increased the contrast. I took the blues down. I'm sorry, I didn't affect the blues, and I added quite a bit of magenta to the sky. I also increased the clarity, which means I, affected the contrast of the sky. So again, here it is. This is the demarcation line that I have here for its application. It's a fairly shallow gradient switch from being 100% effective to 0% effective. Again, if I hide it, this is how it looked like. And this is how it looks like now. Now, if you come down here, all the way down, you see that I did something else to it. I used this curve to affect the gradient. I did that in two different ways. This here is affecting the overall brightness and darkness and contrast of the image. By putting in two stops here, I took it away from being a linear gradient to be a little bit more contrasty than usual. But I also played with the color. So these are your reds, greens, and blues. I took the curve a little bit, not much, just a tiny bit over towards red. If I do away with it, it looks this way. If I add that line, it gives a little bit more warmth to the area that the gradient affects. Again, removing the reds, adding in the reds. Just in this area, all the reds are going a little bit more reddish than from being magenta. So you can use the curves not only to affect the contrast overall, but you can also affect the color of it. Let's say I wanted to affect the magentas a little bit. I could come here and I could make them more greenish, which doesn't look right, but I could come down and make them a little bit more purplish, which makes it a little bit more dramatic. Again, this is without it, and this is with it. I'm adding quite a bit more magenta to the gradient. Again, this was just a simple linear gradient, with a little bit of adjustment to the brightness, some adjustment to the contrast, and some adjustment to the color in magenta and in red and in green. Good.
So you didn't adjust anything below the line, right? Around the boat and
Not with
pier.
the gradients. I adjusted that with the overall adjustment that I did here in the light.
Okay.
So I have added, 0.7 stops in exposure. I added, about half a stop in shadows. So if I hide these, it's quite dark.
Yeah, it's just amazing how it almost reflects the color
Yep.
above that you went to.
Mhm.
It looks like you did the whole thing.
Yeah.
Great. Worked out great.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Martin? Karen? You're awake? Michael?
I've got one basic question.
Yes, sir.
If you could go back into camera raw, you remember last night Pat was talking about the similar application in Lightroom Classic where you could move the, I guess, levels of change in the editing up and right. Can you do that in
Well, let's
Camera?
see. Let's see if we can do it. So what he was saying is taking this and putting it somewhere else.
Yes. You right click.
Yep.
Okay.
So this is the default order. And I can take this and change let's say the optics somewhere up here or hide them.
Because a lot of those options I don't use.
Yeah,
Well, a few of them I don't use.
right. See, it says use the arrow keys up and down to move it. So I'm now moving it up all the way to the top if that's what I want to do as my first. So I right click on I'm going to go back to default order and cancel this. So I use the right click over here and then that thing popped up and you can order it. Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. So who can name this bird?
Not me.
I can. Gray-headed swamp hen.
You are correct.
I just photographed one the other day.
Yes. Well, it seems like this is the only one they know that's in that area up in Savannah. It came, it's a bird that escaped from Florida. It had been, they had brought in a bunch of them from Southeast Asia for whatever reason, as pets most likely, but then they escaped and one of them made its way all the way to the Georgia-South Carolina border. So that's the one that we were photographing that day. All right, so what did I do in this one? It tells me lights, cropping, and masking. All right. So lights, this is the original, or let me do it this way. This is the original photograph with all the effects taken out. And this is the photograph with all the effects applied. So lights were changed. A little bit more contrast, shadows and highlights. Color was affected a little bit. And then I went in and did some masking. And the masking was very limited here. I did a gradient here because it looked like it was a little bit too bright on that bottom right-hand corner. And I wanted to darken it. So I applied a small gradient with only 0.35. And that was pretty much it that I did to this photograph. Didn't require much more editing. Now, and I did a little bit of a cropping as well. So here, if I go to the color mixer, like we have seen earlier, I could technically increase the saturation of the orange and red beak. I could take down the saturation of the blues or the aquas, or I could increase the aquas but keep the blues down. So you have a lot of editing that you can do. And also you can change the hue of these colors. So the reds can be either more red or they can be more yellowish. You see how the color of the eye and the beak is changing. The blues can be more magenta or they can be more aqua. We don't want that. So you can edit the hue of any of these colors. You can edit their saturation. And you can also edit their luminance. But the reason I chose this photograph was to show you something slightly different, which Pat was talking about yesterday. And that was the lens blur down here. So I'm going to tell it to apply the lens blur. It's going to take a little bit to register with this blue circle here to analyze the image and find out all the different depths and create a depth map for it. And once you have created that depth map, you can actually visualize the depth by clicking on this visualize depth button, and it gives you the different colors which have different distances from the camera. And this box here determines where the sharpness should lie. And you can also reduce the range, what will be sharp, and I can make it just centered around the bird. It's a much narrower focus than we had initially. And then I stop visualizing it. As you can see, the bird is very sharply rendered. The background is now a lot more blurred, and the foreground is similarly blurred. Again, let me hide this. You see how the waves came into focus? And here they went away. And you can apply, different types of focus. You can change how much the effect is going to be. It can be from 0 to 100%. You can use donuts if you like the view of a telescope or a mirror lens. There are all possibilities here to adjust different adjustments. Any question on the lens blur?
Umit,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to cut this off about quarter till.
Okay.
I don't know how much more you got left.
Well, I'm pretty much done. There's only one other picture that I would like to show you here. So when you are selecting different colors by using one of the using the color mixer, and in this case, I have reduced the blues in the luminance, and I affected their saturation. The image looks okay when you look at it at this magnification, but if you go down to about 200%, you can see that there are some halos around the arms, the branches of the tree. So when using automatic masking, especially with the color mixer, you need to be looking very closely whether or not you are getting any artifacts like you have in this case. I don't know if you can all see this, but see that white line right here? That's all due to the change in the hue and saturation. If I take it away, that line is not there. So it's not an artifact of the taking the picture, but it's an artifact of editing. All right. With that, we should be pretty much done.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Again, if you have any questions, just send me an email. I'll try my best to answer them.
So sorry I have to cut this off, but
Oh, thanks, Ellis.
Thanks, Alice.
Appreciate it.
Not everybody.
Besides, we're getting a lot of thunder out here in West Marietta, so I might be.
yeah, I've got
Popping
to go driving in it now. So
Well.
Good night,
All
everybody.
right. Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Not everybody.